Okay, good evening. My name is Paul Lauenstein. Last March 29th, our daughter Zahava bought an all-electric house built in 1973. First thing we did was sign up for community solar so that right away we eliminated the carbon footprint of the house. However, the house has baseboard electric heat. The house was using so much electricity that it required two 200 amp breaker boxes, one for the electric baseboard heaters and one for everything else. When my wife Lonnie and I realized that Zahava's dream house was an energy hog, we set to work making changes to make it more energy efficient and avoid monthly electric bills of $1,000 or more this winter.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, next slide. This is what the breaker boxes look like. So you can see what a energy hog it is. The one on the left supports the baseboard electric heaters. The one on the right supports everything else, like the hot water heater, the laundry, the refrigerator, the private drinking water well, the lights and electric outlets, etc. Next slide, please. We started by buying a new efficient refrigerator to replace two old inefficient refrigerators. That cut the electricity used by the refrigerators by more than half. When Zahava bought the house, the old refrigerator in the kitchen didn't have a freezer, so there was a second old refrigerator in the basement with a freezer. That was both inconvenient and wasteful of energy. Next slide, please. Next, we would replace the old laundry. We got a ventless heat pump dryer. Note the capped vent in the photo, and in the upper part of that light blue area, you see that little silvery thing? That's the cap on the old vent where the old dryer used to exhaust itself. The heat pump dryer dries the clothes by dehumidification rather than evaporation. The water from the damp clothes goes down the same drain that the washing machine uses rather than going out a vent as water vapor to the outdoors. The heat pump dryer runs about 35 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than a typical dryer, and it does not blow heat out a vent to the outdoors. It uses only about 1/3 the energy of a conventional clothes dryer. Only about 2% of US homes have ventless heat pump dryers, but they are very popular in Europe. Next slide, please. The studio in the walkout basement has 12 4-foot fluorescent bulbs. We hired an electrician to remove the ballast and replace the fluorescent bulbs with LED bulbs that use half as much electricity and last 10 years. Next, please. We replaced the old 80-gallon water heater with a new 50-gallon heat pump water heater that uses approximately 1/3 as much electricity. The new water heater squeezes heat from the ambient air and puts it in the water. Warm air from the adjacent studio enters the utility closet through a vent near the air intake of the water heater, and the chilled exhaust air goes back into the studio via a duct. In summer, the chilled exhaust air provides air conditioning for the studio. Next slide, please. Zahava's a potter. We installed a kiln in the studio. We opted for 3-inch insulation instead of standard 2.5 inch insulation to save energy. When she fires the kiln, she turns up the thermostat on the hot water heater to capture and store some of the heat thrown off by the kiln in the water in the 50-gallon tank. Next slide, please. The house has 28 50-year-old windows, which results in heat loss. We got an estimate of $34,000 to replace all the windows with new ones. That was a non-starter. So we figured out a way to install inner storm windows made of 1/4-inch plexiglass, which is 1/5 as heat conductive as glass and adds another insulating layer of dead air in the windows. Lonnie and I installed them ourselves, a few at a time over the summer. The cost of the materials and tools for all 28 inner storm windows was approximately $3,000, less than 1/10 of what new windows would have cost. Next slide, please. First, we attached a frame made of vinyl to the window using screws. Then we affixed a 1/2-inch wide strip of white felt self-adhesive weather stripping to the vinyl frame. Then we screwed the clear plexiglass to the vinyl frame, sandwiching the white felt weather stripping between the vinyl frame and the plexiglass. We made holes in the plexiglass slightly larger than the screw shafts so the plexiglass can expand and contract with changes in temperature. Next slide, please. The inner storm windows are not very noticeable. Note the baseboard electric heater in this photograph. Next, please. About halfway through the window project, we changed the design. We attached the plexiglass to the vinyl frames using swivel tabs instead of screws to make it easier to take off the inner window panes. One can remove the plexiglass from a window in less than 30 seconds. Next slide, please. This close-up shows how the swivel tab holds the plexiglass to the vinyl frames. This winter, we plan to use an infrared camera to evaluate the degree to which the inner storm windows prevent heat loss. Next slide, please. We got a free energy assessment from MassSave, which said we needed more insulation and weather stripping. We hired a company to add cellulose insulation in the attic. MassSave paid 3/4 of the cost. Next slide, please. The cellulose insulation in the attic is now about 17 inches deep. Next. We also got cellulose injected above the garage ceiling. They had to drill these holes to get the cellulose into the ceiling. When they were done, they plugged up the holes. Next slide, please. After repairing the holes with spackle, Lonnie and I painted the ceiling. And so it looks fine. Next slide, please. We got 4 heat pumps. Each one has a compressor outdoors and a wall unit indoors. Each heat pump has its own remote temperature control. So for example, the master bedroom can be kept comfortable at night without using additional energy to heat or cool the rest of the house. The 4 units combined provide 45,000 BTUs, which should be enough for 22,000 square feet, even in sub-zero winter weather. We kept the electric baseboard heaters in case of emergency. We got 6 quotes ranging from $20,600 to $31,000. We chose the low bidder who did a very good job for us. We got a $10,000 rebate from MassSave, and we financed the rest over 7 years with 0 interest. The $134 per month payment on the loan will be less than the savings on the electric bills. Next slide, please. This is the heat pump wall unit in the studio. It keeps the studio warm and also provides warm air for the heat pump water heater. Next slide, please. We replaced the old well pump and motor, which were 50 years old. The well is about 400 feet deep. The new well provides continuous water pressure instead of turning on and off, which saves energy. Note the wood pile in the lower left of this photo. Next slide, please. While we were replacing the well, this short-tailed weasel popped its head out of the wood pile. Next slide, please. This is the last slide, by the way. I was able to get the records of energy use for the 3 years prior to purchasing the house. The early results of our energy makeover are promising. November, we used 865, or my daughter used 865 kilowatt hours. Last November was 1,920 kilowatt hours, more than double. So we cut it in half for November. However, the true test of the effectiveness of the energy makeover will come this winter. So that concludes my PowerPoint, and I can open it up for questions if people have any.
Oh, that was awesome, Paul. Let's give Paul a Zoom round of applause. Really well done. You and Lonnie, that's fantastic.
It was a cool project. I enjoyed it a lot. It was an awful lot of work. And I forgot to say that all the energy improvements cost about $28,000 altogether, a large part of which was the heat pumps. But we're probably going to save somewhere around $2,000 or $2,500 a year. So the payback is on the order of 8 years, maybe 10, I don't know, something like that. It's going to take a while to earn the money back, and that's based on today's energy prices. And if energy rates go up, then of course the payback will be quicker.
So some people are putting questions into chat, but if you can just put your microphone on and ask the question, I think it'll be easier than for Paul to answer.
Yeah, there's a question about taking the window liners out in the summer to enable windows to open. We can do that. As I said, it only takes 30 seconds to pop them off, but then you have to put them away somewhere and drag them out again in the fall. So the thing is, there's a slider in the front of the house and a slider in the back of the house. And that kind of, if you open the sliders have screens, so you just slide open the door and you can create a nice breeze passing through the house from the front of the house to the back of the house just by opening the sliding doors, which are triple pane glass. Well, those were in good condition when we bought the house, thank God. We didn't have to mess with those. But so, you know, and the other thing is those heat pump are reversible. So in summer, they can provide air conditioning. Last summer, my wife and I really suffered when we stayed overnight there. Probably 1 or 2 nights a week, we were sleeping over there, and there was no air conditioning, which was brutal in the summer. But next summer we'll be quite comfortable because we can use the heat pumps as air conditioners, and it'll you know, make it quite comfortable indoors. And if we need to open up the doors for fresh air, we can certainly do that. So there's workarounds. And like I said, you can take the inner windows off very quickly and open the windows if you want. But again, it's kind of a nuisance to take them off. And then, you know, opening the windows, that means you've got to drag out the screens too and put them on to keep the mosquitoes out. So, you know, it's inconvenient to open windows in summer anyway, because of the fact that you need the screens. So we didn't really compromise too much by putting those inner windows in as far as fresh air is concerned. There's workarounds, and I think next summer is going to be a lot more comfortable than this summer because of the air conditioning provided by the heat pumps. Let's see. Did you plan all the changes up front, or did you plan them as you went? We planned them as we went. What we did was, it was pretty cool. We had a few ideas in the beginning. So we set up this Google spreadsheet and we listed the projects, and by each project I looked up, you know, who the vendors were. I used Google to find vendors in the area because I didn't know anything about Pelham. I live in Sharon, and that's 2 hours away. So, but we could use Google to find various vendors, and we could see how they were rated, you know, how many stars they got, and read the reviews. So we could kind of pick and choose who we dealt with, and we could get multiple quotes. We put their phone numbers and, you know, website, all that on the Google spreadsheet. And in the end, we ended up with about 100 projects, which we've completed. And each time we'd complete a project, we'd put the word done in one of the columns by the name of the project. And it was very satisfying to keep knocking off the projects one by one and put down done each time we got one done. We also put a budget for each item, and we put the actual amount that we spent on each project as well. So that's how it was done on a continuing, you know, basis like that. And we could, all three of us, look at the spreadsheet, no matter whether we were in Pelham or Sharon at any time, and get phone numbers and all that stuff. So it was a big thing, but it worked out very well. Let's see, what else do we have? Did you have a home energy assessment when you were getting started? We got the home energy assessment in June. And we were gathering, it took about 2 months. There was a big, what's the word, delay. We couldn't get they had like a 6 or 8 week lead time to get the assessment. So we signed up for the assessment, and then we went around getting quotes for the heat pumps and other things. But we did get an assessment, and you know, we were doing other things while we're waiting for the assessment. We didn't just stop. We did a lot of other things that didn't involve Mass Save. So yeah, you have to get an assessment in order to become eligible for these fancy rebates that Mass Save gives. You not only have to get an assessment, but you have to do what the assessment says you had to do. In our case, they told us we had to do $4,200 worth of insulation, which we did. But they paid 3/4 of the cost, which is awesome. You know, they also gave us a $750 rebate on the heat pump water heater, and a $50 rebate on the dryer, that heat pump dryer. So how does hot water work again? Okay, well, a heat pump moves heat. from one place to another. And there's a heat pump sitting right on top of the 50-gallon tank, and it moves heat energy from the ambient air and puts it in the water using coils and heat exchangers. I don't know. It's very, if you really want to know how they work, you can go online and get some complicated explanations for how they work. But as far as I'm concerned, the main thing is that heat pumps move energy. They don't generate energy like those baseboard heaters in the house. They generate energy, and that takes 3 times more electricity than moving energy from outdoors to in or from indoors to out, depending on which season it is. And basically the hot water heater is in a utility closet, which is a confined area. There's not enough air in there to provide the heat to heat up 50 gallons of water. So we circulate the air from the studio, which is a much bigger volume of air. It circulates from the studio to the utility closet, and then the heat is extracted from the air, and the cold air that is exhausted from the heat pump water heater goes back into the studio. So in summer, it's great because it air conditions the room, and you don't even need to use the heat pump that can heat and cool the studio. But in winter, we elected to put the cold air in the house instead of putting it outdoors, because it's coming out of the heat pump at about 40 degrees, and it makes more sense to keep the 40-degree air in the house. If you pump the air outdoors, it means that an equal volume of frigid air has to come in from the outdoors. So I'd rather have 40-degree air coming in to the studio than, say, 10-degree air from outdoors, or 20 degrees or whatever it is. It's usually colder than that outdoors in winter. So that's why we decided to circulate the air from the heat pump water heater around in the studio rather than in the adjacent garage.
Paul, can I just ask, does the clothes dryer work the same way as far as taking the heat out of the room?
Let me think. It's it's a different approach. They're not using, like, it runs a lot cooler than a regular heater. It's basically functioning as a dehumidifier. Heat pumps not only heat or cool, but they also dehumidify, and that's why heat pumps always have a drain on them to drain away the condensate that happens. And basically what's happening with that heat pump dryer is it's condensing the water vapor that's in the air in the chamber and turning it from water vapor into water, and then it goes down the drain and keeps doing that until the clothes are dry. It's functioning as a dehumidifier more than but it's called a heat pump, but it's more emphasizing the dehumidification side than the heat transfer side. I think
Doesn't it heat the clothes a little bit?
a little bit, yeah. They're warmer than they would be with no heat, and so I presume that heat comes from the ambient air. But again, I'm a little shaky on the exact physics of what's going on there. But I know it's very efficient, and it does take about 50% longer to get that clothes dry. But who cares? It's robot time. You just set it, and when it's done, it's done.
Can I also just ask quickly, because I just signed a contract to get 2 heat pumps today,
Oh, cool.
and the price is a lot more. I was wondering when these were installed. I know
In
the
August.
In August?
Yep.
Oh my.
Like I said, we got 3 quotes, and they range from $20,600 up to $31,000. And it was quote number 6 that was actually the cheapest one.
Oh my God.
I kept going after more and more quotes because I wasn't satisfied with any of these guys. But the last guy, a lot of these guys, not only was the price kind of high, but they didn't seem to know what they were talking about. I learned a lot from talking to them and from looking on Google, and I learned enough to be dangerous. I mean, I could kind of size up what they're saying. I could tell when they were blowing smoke and telling me things that I didn't think were right. And I didn't want to deal with someone who was doing that. So this last guy was a straight shooter. He gave me an honest price. I think what's happening is a lot of these heat pump installers are dipping into that $10,000 rebate. They're kind of sharing it with you.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they have that rebate has goosed up the prices for heat pumps quite a bit. and raise the whole market. But I found one guy who was still pricing as if there was no rebate at all. And so I used him and it worked out great. I was very lucky, I'd say,
Right.
to get
Yeah,
that.
I also got like 4 quotes and it was very frustrating because one of the things that kept varying was the size of the unit that they were recommending. So I
Yeah.
had to keep getting more quotes to figure out like, what
Yeah, that
was
was,
the actual correct answer. And then the pricing was vastly different. The second to the last quote that I got was so much higher. For the quote that I took, I ended up going back to the very first person I started with who had
well,
the
it pays
best
to
deal.
shop around, when you're
Yeah,
dealing
but
with
I
that
still
kind of
didn't get
money.
near the deal that you got.
Well, I've been trying to get a heat pump for myself, and I've been through about 5 quotes myself so far, and I haven't found one that maybe you can tell me who you like the best. Send me an email. Let me know who it is. I'll see if I've talked to them before or not. I've been trying to get a similar deal
Yeah,
for myself and haven't been able to do it so far.
yeah, it's not straightforward.
Yeah, it's challenging, but you know, when you get to the other side and you've got it in your house and running, that one thing we notice about my daughter's house is very comfortable. I mean, it just feels comfortable in there all the time, much more so than before. And a lot of people say that when they get heat pumps, they just feel comfortable in their house. My sister got them too, and she just feels more comfortable than she did before, partly because she didn't have air conditioning before. So that
Yeah,
helped a lot.
we didn't either, so
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
I'm looking forward to it.
Especially with global warming. We're going to get some hot weather. We've been doing El Nino, right, up until for the last few years, and the temperature hasn't been going up that much. Has been going up, but they say that as soon as, well, is it La Nina or El Nino? I can never get it straight, but as soon as it switches over to the other one, we're going to get a blast of heat
Mm,
that we haven't, likes of which we've never seen before. So it's good to get some air conditioning. You may think you can tolerate it, but wait till the serious heat comes. You'd be glad you got heat pumps in that case that you
right,
can reverse and use them for air conditioning efficiently. It's one thing to have air conditioning. It's another thing to have efficient air conditioning.
right.
So
Speaking of heat, Paul, where are you getting the infrared camera?
you can rent them from Home Depot. Silas got one at one point, but I think he gave it back to whoever got it. I'm going to have to use
Right,
Mr.
I
Google to
remember he
find the
had
answer to that
one, yeah.
question. I use Mr. Google to find the answers to all my questions, and I'll do this. But I did find out that Home Depot rents them. I don't know if it's the right kind or if it'll work in this case, but I suppose it will. I want to see. You could see that those windows come in pairs, and I'll take the plexiglass off one of them and leave the plexiglass on the other one, and then take a picture of both of them with the infrared camera and see if you can tell the difference. It'll be interesting.
Paul, explain the strategy for how many heat pumps you decided to buy and why you didn't put more things together on a single heat pump. Just why
Well,
did
that's
you?
a good point, Rory. Yeah, 1-to-1 heat pumps. 1-to-1 means one condenser for each wall unit, and we have one condenser for each. We have 4 condensers and 4 wall units, and that is, they told several people I talked to told me that was more efficient. And as far as the total amount, the 45,000 BTUs, we got quotes ranging from 42,000 to 50,000. So by virtue of having gotten 6 quotes, I kind of got the idea of where we ought to be, and was pretty confident that we weren't under or over building. They do say that you shouldn't overdo it with the heat pumps. You shouldn't put in, you shouldn't oversize it. They say that reduces their efficiency. But, that's why talking to a bunch of people and asking a lot of questions can help you calibrate your mind and make a good judgment call about which vendor to use.
So did each vendor agree on the number of heat pumps that you should use, or was that an arbitrary number based upon what they felt you were trying to condition the
Well,
air.
one of them proposed a mini split. One of them told me you had to have a heat pump in every room in order to get the rebate. We do not have a heat pump in every room, and we did get the heat rebate. So there again was an example of someone not knowing what they were talking about. Because I called Mass Save and asked them that question. They said absolutely not. You know, you have to have enough BTUs to heat and cool the whole house if you want the whole house rebate of $10,000. But you do not necessarily have to have one in every room. So I knew that guy was blowing smoke. And another one had proposed, you know, 2 or 3 wall units for one compressor. And I was after efficiency. I didn't want to compromise on that. So I wanted 1-to-1. And so that kind of ruled him out. So you know what I mean? You just have to keep asking questions and talking to people until you're comfortable with something. And it's a lot of work just going through that process of getting quotes.
Yeah, I would just add, Rory, that, so my experience, at first I was just gonna put one in the kitchen, dining, living room. And first I got a, you know, somebody to come out and recommending a 15,000 BTU. Then the next person who came out recommended a 24,000 BTU. And then I had an 18,000 BTU. I mean, it was very frustrating.
I mean, one thing to keep
but-
in mind too is that you can do a partial. You don't have to do a whole house thing. You can do like half your house, or just do one in the master bedroom or something like that. And if you do a partial installation, you don't apply it to the whole house, you can get a rebate of $1,250 for every 12,000 BTUs. So 12,000 BTUs is equivalent to what they call 1 ton. So if someone says 1 ton, that means 12,000 BTUs, or ton. And that for that, you get a $1,250 rebate. If you do 2 tons, you'd get a $2,500 rebate. So, you know, what you have to do is ask the question, is it worth heating and cooling the whole house and getting the 10,000, or are you better off with a half size system, you know, which will cost half as much, but then you only get the 2,500. So you do the math and figure out which is best. Every situation is different. And one thing that really is good, though, as I said in the presentation, is having multiple zones. This house you see in behind me only has one thermostat. And that's so it's a single zone house. So if we want to keep the bedroom warm, we got to keep the whole house warm. Or if we want to cool the bedroom in summer, we got to cool the whole house. Whereas with ductless heat pumps, you can have multiple zones and only use heat or cool where you need it. And that also saves a lot of energy.
Paul, can I just come there, ask a question? Because when the guy came out, he said that they did a study and it showed that it was actually less efficient to turn your thermostat up and down on a daily basis.
Yeah, my guy
It's
told me
okay
this.
if you're going on vacation, you definitely turn it down.
Yeah,
But for
yeah.
it to be going up and down, you know, night to day,
Right.
it's actually less efficient with
Yeah,
the
my
heat
guy
pump.
told me the same thing. So that's where you find out if they're telling the truth is if several people.
Yes, yeah, I know. That's the only way.
So now you know that's true.
Yes.
And so you said it, I think my daughter's is set at like 68 or something like that. So, and she keeps the studio like at 65 and then wears a sweater down there when she's throwing clay. So. How are we doing for time, Cheryl?
We're okay. We could take another question or two.
All right. Yeah, someone said El Nino brings the hotter weather. Thank you. So I guess we must have been in the La Nina cycle up until now. I think that was Helen Poynton said that. Thank you, Helen, for that information. There is a company called Adobe. There used to be a Mass Save discount that has a quote comparison service. I'll be darned. I'll have to look that up on Mr. Google. All right, let's see. I ran into that as well when we replaced our AC last June. It took so long for Mass Save to reply that we had already contracted with someone to replace it. Yeah, it's managing the coordinating mass save with your contractor is somewhat challenging. But for $10,000, I did the work. It was worth it. You have to do things in a certain sequence. You can't get ahead of mass save. If you haven't done your energy assessment and you get the heat pumps installed, you're not going to get any rebates. Or if you haven't done I'll say this, what I learned was, if you get an energy assessment and the amount of work that's required is less than $1,000, you don't have to do it. It's only if the is in excess of 1,000 that you have to do it in order to become eligible for all these, especially the heat pump rebate. That's where the big money is. So at least in our case, that's where it was. Let's see. Does anybody want to speak up? If I haven't, did you consider solar panels? Great question. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, we did. The house is too shady for solar panels. In fact, you may have noticed as I was going through that presentation that I said there were 2 old water tanks in the utility room that we took out and replaced with a heat pump water heater. One of those old water tanks was for a solar hot water heater, which the former owner had disconnected because he put on a new roof less than 4 years ago. And rather than put the solar hot water heater back on the roof, we just took the whole thing out. And the reason was because that solar hot water heater had been installed maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And the trees have grown up since then higher. So the house is just too shady for solar hot water or for, PV, photovoltaic solar panels. So we did consider it too shady. So we went with community solar, and we got all our electricity from solar panels, but indirectly through the grid and through a community solar, which is working out fine. So, it's a lot easier. One less project we had to do. So
Is community solar these days still 10% less, or
yes,
5% still 10?
It's 10% off of the one we got from Solstice is 10% off Eversource, but Eversource's prices are going up. So the 10% goes up too. You know what I'm saying? It's linked to the Eversource price. So if the price of Eversource goes up, then the community solar goes up. Admittedly, it's 10% cheaper. It's better from that point of view. But if you had solar panels, it would be completely independent of price fluctuations at Eversource. So that, if you can put solar panels on your roof, I would encourage anyone to do that. We have a few on our house. Not as many as I'd like because half our house is shady, but if you have a good roof, a south-facing, exposure, put on the solar panels. You have a hard time going wrong with that one.
Our old friend Bree is having a bunch of solar panels put on, and she's putting some in a field.
Oh yeah, ground mount. Yeah, that's good. They put them on pedestals in the field. Yeah, that's a good idea. If you've got a field, there you go.
Well, this is fascinating. Let's give Paul again another round of applause. We really appreciate you doing this, Paul, and excellent work.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, to share these ideas. And if anybody wants to discuss it, I think many of you have my email address or my, should I put that in the chat?
Sure.
I'll put my
We
email
should
and my
also-
phone number. Feel free to contact me. Really, I like talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and we do have your blog. Your blog is on the website. So if you look at the blog section of the SSC website, you'll see Paul's story. So
Good point.
And I'm
All right.
keeping that graph updated every month, by the way, on the electric.
great.
It'll be really
Mhm.
interesting for the next couple of months when we
Mhm.
really get into the hard, cold weather, then we'll see how much difference it makes. So keeping my
Awesome.
fingers crossed
All
after all
right.
that work.
Thank you. I'm going to